From scarab to statue. Here's a look at McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, the Blue Beetle movie, Blue Beetle statue. The first in his family to graduate college, Hammy Reyes harbors dreams of law school, but instead is conflicted in the face of threats to his home and the misfortunes befalling his family. When he becomes symbiotically connected to an ancient alien biotechnology, Jamie is bestowed with the almighty but unpredictable powers, leading him to fulfill his destiny and become a new generation of superhero Blue Beetle. While Hammy sits rather high up on his podium, I'd like to go ahead and thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the Blue Beetle movie Blue Beetle statue that we could have a look at in this review. We're going to go ahead and also bring in a couple of statues. Actually, I'll bring in one other statue from another DC movie, and I'll also bring in Hammy Reyes, the figure, so you guys can see kind of the differences of sizes. One thing that's rather interesting about the statue is that there's two configurations for it. As I have it right now, you can have Hammy actually being on top of this Blue Beetle podium, or you can also just do away with the podium altogether and have Hammy instead attached onto the display base. I'll show you guys how more that works in a moment. In the meantime, though, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the statue stands. With this configuration, you're looking at Hammy being about 10 inches. Actually, he's exactly 10 inches in height, or it's going to be about 25.5 centimeters tall. And as for comparison, let's slide over the Blue Beetle from the movie, and we'll bring in Michael Keaton from, of course, the Flash movie. Now, looking at this, it's kind of hard to see whether they're actually in scale with one another. Now, you would be obviously just looking at Blue Beetle, and you'd be looking at Michael Keaton Batman and realizing that clearly Batman is the taller of the two. But keep in mind also that Hammy Reyes is a teenager in the movie, a young lad. Obviously, if you're comparing him, did I just say young lad? Well, you're comparing them to Michael Keaton. Keep also in mind that Blue Beetle is in a crouched position. If he was standing upright, I'd have to believe that he'd actually be in scale with the Flash movie Batman if you wanted to put the two on display. Speaking of which, though, they are using also the same display stands with the DC logo printed down below, though. Ironically, though, enough, is that Blue Beetle's DC logo, actually, let's just pick this up so you guys can see. The DC logo printed on Blue Beetle's stand is somewhat quite larger than the one that we got here from the Flash Batman movie statue. Also, as well, we can bring in Hammy Reyes. I've got here from the figure. This is the one that just has the blaster there attached onto his end of his forearm. So, guys wanted to see what the difference was between a figure and a statue. Not, though, I'm sure that you can be displaying the two together on your shelf. But I guess if you are really a fan of the Blue Beetle movie and you'd like just to have all the merchandise from the film, I guess it's not that far removed, the idea of actually having a statue and a figure all together on a shelf. McFarlane statues don't tend to come with much other than a trading card. So when it comes to Blue Beetle, when you get him first out of his packaging, you'll notice right away that the figure only comes included with his own trading card. It isn't even really his own either. It so happens to be shared with one of the ones that we've already got before from the figure. Not only is the front exactly the same to one another, but if you also look around to the back, the real name obviously is going to be exactly the same, but also the paragraph reads. So they are exactly the same cards with one another. A little disappointing, because if you already have been collecting the two Blue Beetle figures, you kind of would have liked to have gotten a brand new card. At least that's my mindset. On the other end of it, though, at least if you have one card that gets damaged, you have at least always still one extra card to work with. So I guess it's kind of good and bad. We're going to move that to the side. Now, I did already say that this Blue Beetle does have two configurations. When you first get him out of the packaging, the display stand, the podium, and of course, Hammy is all separate pieces. When you do attach them, though, you will want to be careful of, especially this display stand. It makes a lot of noise every time it attaches onto the pegs, and it has me really then worried that one of these pegs are eventually going to break. Now, also, too, I suppose, talking about configurations, I suppose you really could have it as another configuration, just doing away with the stand altogether. The stand itself, as we already looked at, is basically the same one we got with Batman, although the configurations of the pegs are in a little bit different of places. It does also have still the DC logo printed down below here, but it's a little bit bigger than Michael Keaton's. So you have the stand. Then, of course, you've got yourself the podium. Attaching onto the podium, of course, then you've got yourself Hammy. If you're looking at the podium, it's a really interesting thing, and I would certainly make the valid argument as to why you would not want to have the statue displayed with it. Certainly, first of all, it gives a lot more height to the statue, but also as well, there's a lot more for your eyes to look in on. Of course, you can see there's the Blue Beetle scarab symbol, and down below there, of course, you've got Blue Beetle. This has all been cast in black plastic. You really get the chance to kind of see what it's been cast in. By the side of it, unfortunately, doesn't have really any paint. It's only really been brushed really with the metallic blue on the front, and also been brushed on the back as well. But unfortunately on the sides, there's nothing there other than just the molding of the black plastic. Now this does have 2 peg holes on the bottoms of this, so of course, as we already looked at, it does attach onto the display stand. If though you wanted to take Hammy off, for example, very carefully removing him from, again, the posts. What's funny though is that the posts on the top of the podium are longer than the ones that were actually onto the display stand. Looking at Hammy here for a second, of course he's in a crouched position. I really, again, love the look of the suit. I will say though, it has translated extremely nice to a statue here as well. The pose, I think, works quite well for the character, and to spin this around so you can see all the workings and all the sculptings that they put to the piece. I really like, again, like the metallic blue that they've used here. It just, again, happens to be, of course, the same blue that they've used for the figure as well. But kind of like the figure, though, I feel like the colors of the main suit, the black parts, or in this case, somewhat silver parts, I don't think are really all that dark enough that the blue really doesn't get the chance to pop. If only the case was that they made this just a little bit darker, I think you'd really have the chance for the blue to stand out a lot more than what it is right now. Head sculpt wise, it looks really fantastic. You've got the mostly yellow eyes, with of course the interior being in white. It's a really nice looking head sculpt. Now again, there's no posability to this because this is, again, just a staction statue, so you can't move the arms, you can't move the legs, you obviously can't move the head. It's basically what you see is what you get. Now what you get though is, again, ways of differently displaying it. So like, for example, if you did want to use just solely the display stand, let's just say you're pressed for space, what you can do is that the holes provided on the bottoms of the boots actually do line up in the same spots. I gotta say, I would be really disappointed if, for example, you could only attach, say, the podium on here, the tower, the part that, of course, he crouches on top of. But then if they had moved the holes around on the bottoms of his boots, so you wouldn't be able to put them in the same place, that would be a bit of a bummer. But though, if you wanted to have the statue displayed really without this altogether, or if you wanted to really have it displayed behind it, you could also do that as well. Or again, as we've already had a look at, you can then just attach the statue onto the display stand. The thing about it though is I don't know if I would do this too frequently. More so, not as much when you're attaching Hammy here to the display stand. Although it is really hard at times to kind of get his feet removed. Just because, again, when they are sitting inside the boots, I don't know if you can actually see, they don't go straight up. They kind of go slightly more on an angle. My biggest concern, though, is, again, doing this too frequently, because, again, we're just going to line up the holes provided here to the pegs on the bottoms here. And when you're actually putting them in, you have to kind of spread the boots over. I don't know if that makes any sense. You kind of have to put one boot in, and then you have to kind of pull his leg out just a little bit so then it lines then up with the peg that's next to it, and then fit that in place. So, again, like if you wanted to, you could have Hammy just simply attached onto the podium like this. Or again, if you wanted to, you can then take this part of this and again just line it up to the holes. This was the most nerve-wracking really of all the assembly, because when you're snapping it in place, it really does feel every single time I'm removing it like there's always the risk that I'm going to be breaking the peg. I would imagine, though, once you're probably having the statue in your collection, you're likely going to be settling on this. But I think, first of all, it was a great idea that McFarlane Toys would give you different configurations for this, so you weren't always locked into the idea that it had to look exactly like this. I mean, obviously, when we already looked at like the Flash statues, for example, both Michael Keaton and, of course, the Barry Allen statue, those only had really one configuration. I think, in fact, Flash had a couple of different ways that you could display the statue. But I like that. I like that if you don't have as much space on your shelf, let's just say your shelf space is maybe like this instead of this, you can then really just attach Hammy, attach him onto the display stand, and then just sort of move the pedestal out of the way and have it displayed that way. Nice looking statue. I will say, though, I mean, like, from the statues we've looked at from McFarlane Toys, at least more to the DC films, the Blue Beetle one that we got here might be my favorite of the batch. over the years, I find myself liking statues more and more. I'll always be really an action figure collector as well, but there's something to be said about a statue that just looks show-worthy on a shelf. The thing about the statues is, while it has to unfortunately forfeit the posability that figures still possess, there's definitely a lot more to look at when it comes to the eyes. And let's face facts too, unless you're one that really is good at posing figures, it's kind of hard at times to kind of get a figure as posable as it may be in a similar pose as what you're getting sometimes with statues. I will say the larger-than-life look to Amy Reyes here does look quite good as a statue. It does have sort of all the same carried over colors that the original figures that we've already had a look at, that being the backpack with the, the big wing deluxe figure, and also the regular Amy Reyes that we also looked at as well. Color scheme wise, they're exactly the same. So it looks like they have obviously stuck to the very similar palette. And sort of in that same way, one of my critiques I would say about the figures was the fact that the rest of his suit, while the blue looked always really good, the gray sort of just under-delivered. And I maybe feel like the blue didn't have a chance to really shine as much because the rest of the suit was a little more of a silver and not as much of a darker black than what it should really have. Other than that, though, I think the statue turned out to be really good here. Now, the thing about it, though, as we saw in this review, is the fact that you can dismantle this and decide for yourself if you have limited space at your disposal. It's always fleeting, I know, in my own house, and you don't really have as much space to accommodate a higher figure, then simply just remove the podium, the pedestal that he's perched on top of, and just have Amy instead attached onto the circular display base. So I kind of like that there's options available, at least, and not with all the cases, of course, of the DC statues that we've already had a look at, but at least the case here with Amy Reyes, that you can at least display them in many other ways than just what you're looking at right now. What do you guys think of the statue? Let me know down below in the comment section. Could you guys see yourselves as this being a statue you pick up and adding to your shelf? Let me know down below in the comment section. Big thank you once again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the Blue Beetle Amy Reyes statue that we had the chance to have a look at in this review. If you guys enjoyed the video, why not hit it with a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more, we may have now wrapped up things with the Blue Beetle movie for at least right now. I don't think there's anything really else that McFarlane has in the pipeline when it comes to Blue Beetle movie, but I know we're kind of now moving into Aquaman, and definitely looking forward, based on what we've seen on images online. Some of those figures are looking fantastic, and just recently seeing, in fact, the trailer, not taking too much hopefully away from Amy here, but looking at the trailer for Aquaman, there's something more wondrous, I would say, about the Aquaman movies over, say, like Flash. I hate to keep going back to the Flash movie, but I really think like Aquaman, sad to say this, I think this might only be the last time Momoa might actually be Aquaman, but like based on the trailer alone, and obviously I'm a bit biased as well to Black Manta, I really think the new Aquaman movie is going to be stellar when we see it on the screen. But yeah, if you guys certainly want to stick around for more, and also as well, if you guys have more time on your hands as well today, why not popping up at the very end of this video will be a playlist. Feel free to give that a gander. That's covering, of course, the territory of all the other DC stuff I've looked at over the years from the folks over at McFarlane Toys, with many more to follow. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.